All right, welcome everyone. Today is Wednesday, September 24th, 2025, and this is the SIG Cloud Provider Office Hours meeting. SIG Cloud Provider is a sub-project of Kubernetes SIGs, and as such, we follow their meeting guidelines, which can basically be summarized as please treat everyone as you would expect to be treated, or explicitly so. Please be kind to each other. And if you'd like to talk, please raise your hand and I will call on you. Alrighty. So, before we get into agenda topics, I'd like to open the floor up to any sub-projects that might want to give updates. Um, I'd feel free to put things on the agenda here in the future, but since there's nothing there, I'll just open the floor up. Does anyone have a sub-project update they'd like to share?
Don't have anything today, but I will take that note for future meetings. Thank you.
Cool. Yeah, thank you. Alrighty. Yeah, if no one's got updates, then we can just go into the agenda topics. All right. So first agenda topic, KubeCon North America maintainer track. We currently have like a SIG update that we've been planning to do for the maintainer track. Bridget had reached out to me in Slack to kind of float the idea, and this is something we had talked about before, but the notion of maybe including another person or a few more people up on the stage with us, because we'll have a nice representative of different kind of clouds and whatnot. So, I think myself and Joel will be there representing Red Hat. Well, we're all there representing the SIG, but on behalf of our employers, Bridget will be there representing Azure. Walter will be there representing Google. And we were thinking that if there were other people there, or Bridget had kind of posited the idea that it might be nice to say, could we get maybe an AWS representative up on stage as well, just to build things out. And I think she had some good ideas about kind of technical breakdowns and the people on the stage. And, she had some notions about, maybe doing like a back and forth, almost panel style, where we talk about different technologies in the SIG Cloud Provider, just purview. So I wanted to, we don't need to make any decisions today or anything, but I wanted to bring the topic here just to see what people thought. Maybe ask, is anyone here planning to be at KubeCon? Who might want to participate in the maintainer track with us.
I'm not sure if I qualify, but I'd be happy to be. And I am planning to be there. So particularly if you wanted to talk about sub projects or talk about Crow at all, I'd be happy to participate. And I am an AWS, yeah.
Cool. And I just like my Zoom is all messed up. I can't see everyone's name. It's Jesse, right?
Yes, yeah.
I'm
Sorry
hearing
about
your
that.
voice correctly. No, no worries, no
Yeah,
worries.
you nailed it.
If anyone should be sorry, it should be like, my Zoom application, because it'll show me most of the names on the participant list, but it leaves some of them off for some reason, and I don't understand why. So,
Got it.
all right,
Well,
cool.
my camera's fully not working at all, so Zoom's not perfect, but
Right,
all right,
exactly.
cool. Thank
We do what we can. Okay, cool. Well, yeah, thank you, Jesse. And I think like I'll probably talk with Bridget, and maybe we'll just get like a Slack thread going in the SIG channel to talk more about this or something.
That sounds great.
Cool. Does anybody else have questions or comments or thoughts about this topic? Okay. Well, we'll move along then. So the next topic, this is very cloud provider specific. And it might be useful to bring this up again in the future as well, but I've been talking with some of the Q developers, and they've been talking to me about this topology aware scheduling that is becoming part of Q. And this leans into a type of topology awareness that goes deeper than just like zone and region, and gets into things like the notion of where hardware is located in a rack, or within the data center, or within a block of networking hardware. And one of the reasons that we're seeing cloud providers do this more and more is because with some of the sensitive workloads that are coming these days, like especially artificial intelligence workloads or large language model workloads, those kind of things. It can be very important, this isn't just limited to those workloads, but it can be very important to know when you're scheduling if you can schedule your applications, close to the storage, for example, or if you can schedule them in the same rack so that they can use like an intra-rack networking instead of inter-rack networking. So like oftentimes, you can get much higher speeds on a single rack than if you have to go between racks. And I realize I'm getting into data center terminology here, but hopefully it follows. So what we're seeing from the cloud provider side, and I think this is something that we can see with, I think we saw it on Google and AWS and maybe Azure as well. But these fields are starting to get populated in some of the automated or managed Kubernetes service offerings, and Q is starting to to respond to that to kind of make its predictive workloads. Um, as part of this discussion, I came across this KEP that I think has been closed because kind of like agreement couldn't be reached about representation of the network topology. But I think it's interesting background material. There was kind of a good conversation here about trying to figure out if there was a way to standardize on some of these things. And this isn't exactly the same, but it's in the same area. So my question going through all this stuff was, is this an area where the SIG might become involved? Because to me, these topology awareness labels that ultimately end up on nodes, um, they it makes sense to me that those would, the cloud controller managers are already applying in most cases region and zone labeling, which are, those are well-known labels that have been agreed upon by the Kubernetes community. But does it make sense that, it seems like CCMs would be a prime target for adding this type of information? And so, I'm wondering, is this an area where the SIG needs to get involved or should become involved? And does this really need anything from the SIG? Because it seems like if the enhancement, if there isn't a way to kind of like standardize on the label names and everything, then it probably just is something the CCMs could do on their own, and there doesn't need to be any standardization for it. So I kind of wanted to bring the question here. And Walter, I see you just joined, so I'll back up just a little bit because I have a feeling you might be interested in this. I've been talking with some of the Q developers about topology aware scheduling that they're working on. And one of the things that they're talking about is, wanting to see how they would get access to these labels that are starting to be used on like GKE and I think EKS as well, to label nodes where, then you can have more information about kind of like, the rack location and the block location of the node in question. And so what I'm wondering is, this KEP had come up to kind of talk about standardizing some of these things, but I don't think they never really reached agreement on it. And I'm kind of wondering, like, and I think you maybe heard the end of this, like, is this an area for the SIG to get involved? Is there anything the SIG needs to do? Or is this just something that we could start to talk with, we could just implement it in the cloud controllers, and there doesn't really need to be a standardization because this is, they could do this thing. So yeah, I'm curious to hear what other people have to say.
I mean, I will say just and bringing the historic perspective that I tend to, hey Jesse, uh, this just sounds like failure zones all over again. And we weren't involved at the beginning, and then we had to spend a lot of time. I mean, specifically Andrew Sykim from the SIG, but we spent a lot of time and effort standardize, like doing the migration and conversion to be able to standardize failure zones across the cloud providers. So my vote would be let's get in front of this one early, because if we decide to standardize later, and we didn't, it gets expensive.
Yeah, appreciate that. Thank you, Walter. Jesse, you got your hand.
Basically +1 to what Walter just said. I think we have precedent for this not being standardized in the past and then having to standardize it later. So I do think this is pretty important that it's not sort of left to arbitrary CCM implementation. Mostly because, this is a space where like customers, end users across the board don't want to have 2 or 3 or 4 different solutions, right? Different greps, different strings. So having something standardized where the implementation has to happen regardless, like we might as well, as Walter said, start as we mean to go on, seems reasonable for sure.
Okay. I guess that's going to bring up the next question, which is, this KEP had been started, and I'm not necessarily sure that this is the best KEP to kind of restart over with this because, it seems like that in one respect, some of these, this topology block and topology rack are already starting to be standardized from the workload perspective. Q is using this, and I think I was looking at this in a GKE feature the other day as well, although I might have lost the link to that. And let's see, do I still have it? Oh, wait, I do. Okay, so let me bring this in. I was trying to do a little research on the background of this. So this is coming out of, GKE, and so like, I think we're seeing the cloud providers starting to use this. And I'm trying to remember yeah, so like, see, this is where it gets complicated, right? Is that, some of these, I don't think these labels have been like standardized and whatnot yet. So like there's differences between how the different clouds do this and everything. So I guess like, Walter and Jesse, since, you two had some thoughts on this, what do you think, and you've probably seen this before, what is the next best step in terms of like, how do we start to build consensus around this, or how could we talk about the next level of this, I guess?
So, I mean, I think there's two things I'm going to bring up. Actually, could you go back to the rather whatever GKE page?
Yeah.
So if I just look at those node labels, right? I mean, there are two pieces just on the labels to begin with. And so I would say that the cloud.google.com names, what I'm going to call it, is a namespace. So that namespace needs to go away. I mean, I don't think anyone cares if you have that one, but that's not the one, that's not the authoritative namespace. So I think we should use the same, I actually just think we should use the same authoritative namespace that we used for failure zones. I think this is essentially, failure zone is basically, excuse the Googleism, is the equivalent of what is the zone scope, right? It's a particular scoping, and block, subblock, and host, in my opinions, are just another physical scoping, right? So we've gone from the zone scope to the block scope to the maybe even rack scope to the machine scope, right? It's all the same concept. So same names, I would say the same namespace. And then I think we just need to agree on what is the name of each of those scopes, right? I mean, block, sub-block maybe makes sense to Google, but may not make, Jesse can correct me, but may not make sense for Amazon. And I think it would be good for us to just come up with a reasonable set of intuitive scope names. And then, we can document somewhere the translation.
Yep, that makes sense. And yeah, like we all have internal different names, whether something's a spine or a droplet or a zone or whatever. But like the end of the day, there's 4 tiers. Customers understand those 4 tiers. So Kubernetes end users just need standardization probably for those labels. That makes sense. And especially if they already exist. in other scopes.
Okay, so under that, guys, I guess I need to review this a little more closely to see what they were trying to do here, because I think this was in a similar, this KEP was doing something similar, although not the same. And then like, should we start talking about this with other SIGs, or should we like propose an enhancement, or like what's the best way to gather more information about this?
I absolutely think that as unfortunate as it is, I think this is going to need a cap.
I mean,
And
I knew it would need a
this is
cap.
not a. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kilmiko.
No, yeah. I mean, I kind of figured it would need a cap. I was just kind of wondering, like, should we start with the cap, or should we get a draft document going and see if we can shop it around a little bit? Or
I mean, personally, I would start with the draft doc, and I'm going to make a couple of statements that are contradictory. So excuse me. Lilith, who's on my team, hates it when I do the I'm going to make contradictory statements and hope if someone else is smart enough to deconflict them. So the first thing I'm going to say is I would start with the draft doc for the team. I try and get at least one person from every cloud provider if we can, and just sort of do a lot of the thought process, throwing things at dartboards, seeing if we can come up with names, trying to understand what the mappings are, get as much of that done. We should probably look at the conversions that Andrew did. I can probably even get Andrew to show up. I mean, he doesn't show up much anymore, but I might be able to get him to show up and give us a quick brain dump on what the experience was like for failure zones. So I think that all makes sense. The other thing I'm going to say, though, is the KEP deadline is coming up fast. And so right now, even if we just wanted to, if we wanted any hope of getting this, even an alpha version of these labels into 135, we don't have long to get the KEP together.
yeah, I have a feeling this is probably going to be 136, if anything, for alpha.
Yeah, quite probably. But I figured I would mention the rapidly approaching KEP deadline.
No, yeah,
I mean,
yeah, great to mention it for sure.
Well, and I also want to be clear, right? Like telling people to go to do a KEP is a great way of killing an initiative. And I just want to be very clear that when I say we need a KEP, I am not trying to kill this initiative, right?
Yeah.
I just think that we need a document, and we need a way to really discuss this with other folks. I mean, as an example, we probably want to chat with the DRA folks, because I would be very surprised if DRA isn't interested in this and doesn't have some sort of stuff that they want to do in and around this. And just, SIG Node probably cares quite a bit about this.
What about like SIG scheduling too? Is that something we want to? It seems like this is going to be pretty central to kind of stuff that they might be interested in.
I mean, I can certainly envision a world in which someone starts wanting to put in scheduling rules like, please try to I mean, just like they do with failure zones, where you say, please try to, like an anti-infinity, where you say,
Right.
I would really like, I would like instances of this to be in different failure zones, and if not different failure zones, at least different racks at all.
And I guess like I noticed SIG networking was tagged on this, but this one was really about cluster network topology, less about, kind of some of the things that we're talking about here.
For
So,
us, those are kind of the same thing.
okay.
We talk about like a droplet as a network topology or a spine, etc. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of makes sense that unless you're doing like was it VPC, that you're generally going to have an association between the physical layout and the network layout.
Correct. Yeah, and that's where it matters. And I think your call out for DRA is correct, since not exclusively, but a lot of that has been around the new NVIDIA architectures and things where you have these intra rack, as you were saying, Amiko, right? The intra rack communications and being able to say, well, my topology is for this versus inter rack versus, yeah. But sometimes it's just for like fault tolerance, right? Like you want to be able to say, hey, I know architecturally this cloud provider gives me this on this power supply and this other one is on this other power supply. So, that sort of stuff.
Yeah,
And sometimes
absolutely.
sometimes that's more transparent than with others.
Right.
So,
And,
yeah.
and I was thinking about this while talking with the Q developers, and I was like, well, given that every cloud provider is kind of coming up with their own labels, it's like, yeah, what do we, can we even come up with a standard way to do this, or do we just want to make space for each cloud provider to kind of do this and promote it? But I think like if we could have something standard, that would be really helpful. I'm a little worried that the previous attempt to do this did not go well. So okay.
So
Yeah,
actually,
go ahead.
that brings up a great point. And I mean, if the answer is we don't know and we're not sure how to find out, then we don't know and we don't know how to find out. But uh, were there any clues on why it didn't go well?
I'm still trying to understand that. Like my very, very basic like awareness so far is that they couldn't agree on what information was actually needed. And that maybe it started to look different between the cloud providers, but that's just a very basic understanding of it.
Well, I mean, I will make the odd concept. That's what almost literally that's why our SIG exists, and so maybe the answer is that it didn't go well because it was the wrong SIG doing it.
Right. I mean, right, fair point, and to the notion of like looking at what Q is trying to do here, like Q is already, they're already kind of looking at the cloud providers, and the cloud providers are starting to add these in the managed offerings, right? So it's like they are kind of already pushing towards some sort of, at least standard values they would want to see from a user perspective. So it seems like we could start pushing towards some sort of standardization. Okay. Does anybody else have thoughts or comments or questions about this topic? And I guess we'll just, I could take an action item to start putting together a draft document for that. Put me, yeah, Marco, please.
Yeah, I just collected some data for current topologies, related labels that I am seeing in a cluster on AWS, and yeah, it looks like we have a different scope, so standardizing that, it will be very great for that kind of application.
Yeah. Yeah, this is what I've been trying to look at clusters made in different managed services to see if I could observe what these things look like, but I haven't made a ton of progress yet. So yeah, that makes sense to me though, Marco. Like and this might have been the problem last time, was that like everyone had their own kind of like data that they wanted to express, but there was just not a good way to kind of bring it together. Um, okay. Well, that is all the topics that we have for today. Unless folks have ad hoc topics they would like to add. Otherwise, I will move into looking at our triage. Okay, so let's see if we got anything new that needs triage here. Looks like nope. We've still just got this flaky test. Walter, I don't know if you had. I think we're still just waiting for some sort of follow up here from a GCP engineer to take a look.
That's fair. I'm actually going to. I'm going to be cruel. Hey, Lilith, are you? I notice you're here.
Yeah, I can follow up on this.
Yeah, can you follow up on this? Probably go start by chatting with Yuju and find out who the best person to follow up with.
Yeah, sure, will do. Thank you.
Thank you.
Lali, what is your GitHub handle? I'll ping you here.
Lalit C375. I can comment it. Yeah, it's this one. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, everybody. Okay. And I think that was the main one. We had looked in the past and there was just much older stuff after that. Yeah, this one I know where this is a whole other ball of worms. Okay, so let us look at our periodics to see how things are looking there. Looking pretty good. Check across the. All right, love to see it. It was a week ago. Yeah, okay. All right. Does anybody have any last minute items they would like to bring up before we call this meeting to a close and take about 30 minutes of our day back? Going once? Going twice? All right, that's a meeting. Thanks everyone for showing up, and we'll see you all next time.
Hey, thanks.
I'm going to copy these notes from the chat here. Thanks, Marco.
Okay, bye everyone.
Later, everybody. Yep, I'll shut down the meeting in a minute. I'm just taking some notes here. And that's a meeting.